Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would go ahead and do the single most requested video I've had for the past week, and that is about the debate between Dr. Mike Israetel and Lyle Mcdonald. It was about volume, and they were discussing Brad Schoenfeld's study. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And you know, the thing is, guys, this was a very, very nuanced debate. Right, and they didn't even really disagree that much, to be fair. And it's kind of like Lyle had said early on. He didn't think the debate would be worth doing because they're going to agree on 90% of points, which is generally going to be the case. And that's why it's kind of funny. And I feel like Lyle has his own stance on some of that a lot of this involves politics inside the fitness world, academic world, all of that more than anything else. I happen to agree there. And that's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets interesting because I have my own biases and different views on these people. As far as likability goes, I actually like Dr. Mike. Like, I think Dr. Mike's funny. I think he has a good sense of humor. I generally enjoy what he does, right? He's a likable person. He's funny. Hell, I like the fact that he shows his guns. I mean, for me, that actually even speaks volumes. But that's my own personal bias, right? That's my personal bias. I don't like Lyle. Lyle doesn't like me. In fact, Lyle blocked me on Facebook. Lyle blocked me on Facebook, not the other way around. I didn't block him, he blocked me. And Lyle can be a right dick, and he knows that. He admits that. He always says he doesn't care if people hate him. And, you know, here's what I'm going to say on that. No, I think he does care. I think Lyle enjoys having people hate him. I think he is intentionally an asshole because he likes people to hate him. He gets off to it. He enjoys it. It's just part of his personality. And accordingly, most of us don't like him. But I respect him. And that's the interesting point. You know, and that's what people need to remember when it comes to these discussions and everything else. Everyone wants to get so caught up on the internet with who they like, who's likable. If that's how you determine where you get your information, whether you like somebody, you're kind of a dumbass. Let's just be honest. You're a dumbass. You really are. If that's how you determine if someone's information is good, is if you like their personality, you're stupid. Let's just call it what it is. So that being said, I think Lyle is a brilliant guy. And, you know, even Mike gave him credit for that. Mike gave him credit. He said, Lyle's a genius. And he is. He absolutely is. But he is an asshole. And I don't like him, but I respect his knowledge. So the point we come to with all of that, they had a lot of debate about nuanced points. And a lot of Lyle's early argument had to do with statistical analysis, right? And I can't sit here and bore you guys with that, but the problem they came to is that he noted that the statistical analysis didn't show through anything that there was a statistical significance to these doing these extreme amounts of volume. And when we talk about extreme amounts of volume that Brad looked at in the study, it was 45 sets. That was his highest volume group, was 45 sets, like for quads. So lower body muscles got 45 work sets in a week. Upper body muscles all got like 30 work sets. So we're talking about 30 sets for your biceps, your triceps, all of that. What Lyle pointed out is that statistically there wasn't a benefit to the higher things. And then they kind of debated back and forth between other studies. And what Lyle had ultimately said is that, look, the majority of his research shows, 10 to 20 sets. 10 to 20 sets is usually going to be ideal. And what Dr. Mike generally said was, no, this is a maximum recoverable volume and minimum effective volume and things, which is what things he usually talks about. If you're familiar with his work, you know this. They're really moving targets, right? They're not constant, they're not dynamic, and there could be a lot of cases where you could exceed that and benefit. And that's where I think their biggest argument in this debate was. And they kind of realized that later into the argument of the problem we come to is who is your target audience for that information. In other words, maybe a lot of Mike's people that he's discussing with these extreme volumes are people who want to compete in bodybuilding. Whereas in Lyle had said in the thing, look, a lot of you guys get into this information, you delve into this stuff thinking that, oh, you're going to become a competitive bodybuilder one day, and you're not. You're not. So if that's the mindset you're going into with a lot of this isn't practical or useful. That you guys start training and you start thinking this stuff and then you realize, no, you're really not going to go compete at any serious level in bodybuilding. And in all honesty, if your target audience is someone putting out information or people who are legitimately going to compete at any serious level in bodybuilding, and I mean even serious at the amateur level, your audience is going to be so tiny that you're not going to make a living off of what you do. Like, your audience is almost a statistically non-existent group of people. It's tiny. And so you're not going to be doing anything as a profession for that unless you're directly coaching these people. You're not going to make a living off of it. And from an outreach perspective, is this really what we should be talking about with studies and research either, such a tiny demographic of people? I mean, if we discussed football players, American football players, that would be a much larger demographic when you look at the high school level, the college level. That's a bigger block of people, way bigger. Like, if you really needed an audience for a tiny niche, that would be a much better niche. Or soccer players around the world, right? Not American football. And I think that there's a point to be made with all of that. Is that who is it that you're talking about? And what they also discussed was Dr. Mike talked about, look, like, I mean, Minnow has a client who claims she does 70 sets for her back. And I kind of agree with Lyle there. Come on, that's ludicrous. What sort of quality of sets and what are we counting as back work? And it's not to say that she should quit doing that if she's getting progress, because that's probably most of her cardio. That's a lot of her conditioning work probably. Because I can assure you, no one is doing 70 real sets with real weight for their back. I'm sorry, not buying it. Anyone who's lifted weights, who has any sort of base built, who's believing that, come on. But maybe we could be wrong, but that's the point. And again, I don't think that Lyle pointed that out, that you can't take one outlier and the anecdote for that and apply it to a study. And I think that's the take home that Lyle has always said with these studies like this, that if all these evidence-based people who kiss Brad's ass, who don't want to not get paid $5,000 a lecture to go to these different lectures that they need his pretty much permission and blessing to do, if they really believed this data was good, why aren't they prescribing this to their clients? And the problem I have is not with Mike, because Mike was very much, as Lyle called him, a politician. So let's go back to the point. Mike's a likable guy. Mike has a good personality. He's funny. He is funny. He's outgoing. That's one thing people appreciate about Mike, something I appreciate about Mike. And he kind of pointed out, well, there are cases, though, for overreaching, where you might want to do this for short periods of time. Even I wouldn't say you need these extreme volumes. You wouldn't do them for extended periods of time, because he doesn't have his people do that. We're talking about for maybe short periods of time. Could you benefit from it for someone trying to break past a plateau? Well, that's well and good. But that's very much giving a nuanced answer that's kind of a very political answer to not say the truth. This study wasn't looking at people who were overreaching for a 3-week block or for a 4-week block. This was a longer study. And if people really believed this data, they would be prescribing it more. Instead of saying, well, maybe up to, and that's the point we also get to. Lyle was trying to talk about practical, and then Dr. Mike was talking about, well, we've got individual, theoretical, or specific. Individual, specific points in their training where this might be viable, and that we don't know what the upper threshold is for returns on volume. All right, then we come back to someone like Lyle. Lyle's a very practical person. That's the thing that's interesting about Lyle, is that he will take these extreme abstract concepts and bring them down to say, yeah, but can we make it work in the real world? And that's the real problem we run to. No one trains like that. Nobody trains like that. All right, and no one statistically significant who's winning anything, because you find a couple of people out there who do, but maybe if they're not the best in the world, then, who cares about these individual outliers who are making gains? Because what you do have is that when you go look at various champions of different endeavors out there, most of them aren't doing this sort of resistance training volume. Almost none of them. None of them. Interesting point. And for the average person out there, most people are not going to want to dedicate that sort of time, that sort of recovery, that sort of efforts. And that is very much another point that Lyle always makes. Is this practical? Can people do this? Or is it going to destroy their motivation? Is it practical? Will it work? Can I make this work with athletes, with clients, with people who are following? And that's the problem we run into with this sort of nonsense. And I guess the other question I would ask with all that is that, in what world did Brad even decide to study this? Like who funds a study to study 45 sets for your lower body? As if anyone is, like, as if this is going to be a practical thing for anyone to do, right? Even if it produced 0.5% more muscle growth, right? 0.5% more muscle growth in your legs. Is anybody really going to do it for any sustained period of time? No. It's not practical. It's not useful. Exercise science is supposed to be an applied science, right? It's supposed to be an applied science. And if you can't take this data and apply it to your clients, you can't take this data and apply it to your competitive athletes successfully, it's wasteful. Other than just being a general body of knowledge, which is fine for certain sciences. This is an applied science. And all these guys are coaches, right? Both of the guys up here in the debate, Lyle and Dr. Mike, they're both coaches. They coach people. It's part of their livelihood. And I think that's, again, the point that Lyle makes with some of this. Well, if you guys really, really believed this data, why aren't you applying it to your athletes? And he's talking to all these people out there listening, or the people who are paying you to make them win. When your income is on the line, how confident are you in this data that you're just going to start applying it to all of your athletes? Because the reality is it doesn't match what they really know and believe. And, I mean, Mike is right. Mike is right. We don't necessarily know the upper threshold always for volume. And you know what? It can vary because maximum recoverable volume is very much a moving target. It's very, very individual dependent, and it's very context dependent for that individual. So we can't make, and that's his political argument. He's making a little nuanced argument about this that is technically correct, right? He made a correct argument. That's true. But does that really mean that this data is statistically correct? Does that mean this data was well gathered and well analyzed in the conclusions? And when we're talking about maximum recoverable volume being, again, a very nuanced topic, it's very individual to the individual person and situation. How is it that you supposedly get a whole group of people that your entire block of people shows an upward trend with these extremes volumes that people don't even program? And we know that the maximum recoverable volume is a real thing. Come on, Mike. Mike, you know better. And you know that's why Lyle called you a politician on that. And I like you. Mike, you know that I like you, bro. You're a good dude. So that's the interesting thing from it. The other thing that, if you guys also listen, they had some interesting caveats in there talking about male versus female lifters, which I think is fascinating. It's fascinating for me as someone who, I don't get into who I work with and stuff ever. That's why I don't like people necessarily calling me coach, and I don't offer online coaching services. But I have, at this point in my life, trained a number of females on things like the barbell squat and worked with them for extended periods of time. And they're absolutely right. There's some interesting differences. There's very interesting differences between males and females when it comes to training volume, what they can handle, neuromuscular efficiency, recovery between sets. It's really kind of interesting. And that's a whole different topic. I almost wish they would have a discussion on that topic. That would actually be worth debating. So if I could suggest anything for these two guys to get on again and discuss, I would love to see them discuss some of the differences, like an hour-long discussion about just the differences between the way men and women respond to training volumes, relative intensities, all of this stuff. That would be a fascinating listen. I would totally watch that and cover that if they did it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.